Ikuto is nothing but a stupid runaway teen who thought fleeing from home on a ship would solve his problems, until gravity and bad luck teamed up to throw the idiot into the ocean. Now he washed up on an island where the only inhabitants are women. Sounds like paradise, right? Wrong. These ladies haven't seen a man in forever, and now he's the grand prize in an island-wide Hunger Games. Someone sneaks into Machi's house and eats the food. The next morning, she wakes up and finds the food missing, but smiles. The next day, everyone gathers at Ma's house. Ayane tells them that someone has been stealing from the village. Machi arrives and everyone immediately suspects her. They believe she might be the thief, so they start following her everywhere. Even though she insists she is not the one stealing, no one believes her. They get frustrated, and since he's got nothing he's doing with his feeble, useless life, they take Ikuto with them. Later, everyone starts investigating and notices a pattern in the houses that have been robbed. They figure out that the next target is either Yukino's house or Korin's house. To catch the thief, they split up and kept watch. Meanwhile, Ikuto and Suzu go home to eat before staying up all night. On the way, they see a vegetable garden completely destroyed. They wonder how one person could have done so much damage. That night, Ikuto, Suzu, and Machi stay in one of the houses, waiting for the thief. Suzu starts feeling sleepy, and they realize that Machi has already fallen asleep with her eyes open. Ikuto decides to stay awake and watch. At the other house, Chikage, Ren, Ayane, and Yukino keep watch. Suddenly, the mysterious thief appears. They try to catch him, but he is too fast. Ayane throws a dart at him, but he grabs it. Ren manages to trap him with a rope around his head, but the thief quickly removes his mask and escapes. At the other house, Ikuto is struggling to stay awake. The thief sneaks in, but when Ikuto jumps to catch him, the thief quickly moves and escapes again. The next morning, Ikuto and Suzu return home, only to find everything inside a mess. Food is scattered everywhere, half-eaten. They hear noises from the bathroom. Ikuto grabs a wooden stick and enters, ready to defend himself. Inside, he finds a girl bathing. He nosebleeds his way to the floor. The girl also faints when she sees blood coming from his nose. After calming down, the girl seems extremely shy and hides inside a basket. She introduces herself as Mei and explains her story. She used to live in a circus but got nervous and went on a trip. Like Ikuto, she got stranded on the island during a storm. She apologizes for stealing food. She admits that she didn't eat all the crops, but suspects that her friend Tono might have done it. On their way to find her friend, they run into Meichi. They assume she must know who the real thief is and worry that she will be very angry. Mei quickly runs back to hide at home. Meichi arrives with a mask that the other group found. She claims they are tracking the thief's scent. Just then, Ren shows up and tells them that Chikaji's cucumber field has also been destroyed. They follow the scent and find Mei hiding in the cucumber field. Ikuto spots her disguised as a tree trunk and takes her with him. She explains that she is searching for her missing friend. Suzu arrives with new information, saying they may have found him. They head toward the riverbank, where Machi suddenly throws a dart at someone. The figure quickly covers himself with a cucumber, but then reveals himself. It turns out to be a kappa. Mei runs toward the kappa, hugs him, and defends him. She admits that she was the one stealing food and apologizes. Machi wants to punish them because everyone has blamed her for everything. Ikuto stops her and asks her to forgive them. The other girls also apologize to Machi. She accepts their apologies, but the kappa suddenly bites her, and they start fighting again. While Machi and the kappa argue, the other girls become curious about Mei. They surround her and start asking her many questions, eager to learn more about her. Suzu and Ikuto are busy fixing a windmill near their home. As they work, Ren shows up carrying a chest of drawers. Suzu tells him that Mei and Tono have become official residents of the island and will be living in the windmill. Ikuto asks about Mei, and Suzu tells him she is in the field with Tono, gathering vegetables. Meanwhile, Mei is trying to ask for help from the people working in the field, but since she is dressed as a tree, she ends up scaring them. Back at the windmill, Suzu and Ikuto show Mei her new home. Everyone pitched in to make it nice for her and Tono. She looks around, feeling grateful. She tells them it's perfect. Then she shares a story about how she and Tono ended up together. She says they used to live in the northern forest, but were always being chased by a two-tailed taiga. She also explains how she met Tono. She had been traveling to overcome her fear of people, and one rainy night she hid under a bridge. That's where she found a sacred seal. Tono had been punished for something in the past and was trapped inside. When she broke the seal, he was finally free, but he was heartbroken to see that the river was polluted and his friends were gone. So, he decided to travel with her in search of a better place. Later, Suzu and Tono go fishing, while Mamie realizes she doesn't have everything she needs to cook. She wants to go shopping alone, but just as she sets out, the boys see her acting nervous. They offer to go with her. They stop by Ren's house, where all the carpenters are working, including the ones who fixed their home. Mei wants to thank Ren, but feels too shy, so she hides inside a barrel. Instead of saying anything, she writes a thank you note. Ren reads it and gets excited. When Mei praises the chest of drawers, Ren is so happy that she gives her pots, pans, and everything else she was missing. On their way back, they meet Yukino, who greets them warmly. The protagonist tells Mei this is a good chance to greet her back, but instead of speaking, Mei disguises herself as a bear. This backfires horribly. Yukino gets scared and runs away before they can say anything. Later, they come across Chikage. Ikuto encourages Mei to try again, but this time, things take another strange turn. Chikage becomes very interested in Mei's clothes. She starts touching them. Chikage takes off all of Mimi's clothes, leaving her completely embarrassed. Meanwhile, over at Machi's house, she tells Ayane about the new resident of the island. Ayane becomes curious and decides to go meet her. However, Machi forgets to mention Tono. Ayane finds Mei with the protagonist and Suzu. Just as she is about to attack, she hears Mei saying that she hates her own personality. Ayane stops in her tracks. Instead of fighting, she decides to help. She steps forward and introduces herself, but this scares Mei, who immediately hides as a tree. Ayane tells her that instead of trying to change who she is, she should learn to love herself more. The useless protagonist, Suzu, and Tono all start saying good things about Mei. Ayane listens, but then she notices something. Tono is a kappa. Her face turns pale. She remembers being attacked by a kappa in the past, and without thinking, she runs for her life. Tono, hearing this, suddenly starts chasing after her. He wants to know more about her experience. Ayane panics and runs all over the island, with Tono right behind her and the boys following close behind. The chase leads them near a cliff. Ayane is too scared to notice how close she is to the edge. Mei sees this and acts fast. She jumps onto a tree branch and lands in front of Ayane, hitting her with her knee just in time to stop her from falling off the cliff. Back at Machi's house, she finally tells everyone the truth. She used to dress up as a kappa to scare her sister. Mei and Tono stare at her in shock, disappointed that she was behind it all. At that moment, the other girls arrive. They show Mei all the things they prepared for her to make her feel welcome. Chikage made a dress just like hers. Ren brought more utensils, and Yukino presented a rare species of island bear. Mei looks at all of them, feeling overwhelmed but happy. She thanks them, and for the first time, she no longer feels embarrassed around them. The island is changing. A creature has appeared in the sea and is challenging the leaders, wanting to take their thrones. Meanwhile, Suzu is showering with tonkatsu when someone suddenly opens the bathroom door. At first, she thinks it is Ikuto, but then she realizes that is impossible. Another tonkatsu appears in the bathtub, scaring Suzu. She screams, and Ikuto rushes inside. She throws herself in front of him, shouting about the two tonkatsus. Suddenly, one of them transforms into their master. Later, during dinner, their master explains that the leader of the East, Pandoro, and the leader of the North, Taiga, have been defeated. The protagonist must deliver a message to the leader of the West. However, the leader of the West is missing, and the truth about what is happening must be uncovered for the sake of the island. The next morning, Suzu prepares breakfast and asks the protagonist to take a dish to their chicken neighbors. He delivers it, and after talking with them and receiving a small gift, realizes that he is getting used to living there and talking to animals. He returns home and shares his thoughts with Suzu. She also feels the same way, wishing they could stay together forever, but he does not hear her well. Their master, still eating breakfast, suddenly suggests that they get married. The useless protagonist chokes on his food. Their master then announces that he must leave before the leader of the East seeks revenge, and things get worse. He gives a description of the one challenging the leaders, and the protagonist realizes it is Tono. At Maime's windmill, she is having breakfast with Tono when Pandara returns, looking for a rematch. Tono steps outside, ready to fight, but Mei tries to stop them. Pandaro, instead of listening, falls in love with her at first sight. He grabs her, making her cry in fear. He declares that he will take her away and make her his wife. Tono attacks, and Pandaro fights back. At that moment, their master, the leader of the South, appears and stops them. He reminds Pandora that they are the leaders of the West territory and fighting is not allowed. Pandora trembles with fear, making the protagonist wonder just how terrifying the leader of the West must be. Pandora refuses to release Mei. Their master warns that if he does not, he will have to fight for the title of the leader of the West. Instead of fighting, Pandora panics and runs away, still carrying Mei. Ikuto, Suzu, their master, and Tono immediately chase after him. While Pandora flees, Taiga, the former leader of the North, suddenly appears and stops him with a single blow. Taiga explains that he is no longer the leader since he was defeated. By order of the leader of the West, he must now take the new leader of the North to their rightful territory. The group stares at Tono, but he denies any involvement. Then, Taiga points to Mei as the new leader. Taiga explains how he lost to Mei, though his version of the story is different. He believes she planned everything to defeat him. In truth, she only wanted to escape and accidentally hit him with a rock. While this is being discussed, Pandora takes advantage of the distraction and flees with Mei again. Everyone chases after him, but they cannot catch up. Suddenly, Taiga appears ahead of Pandora and knocks him away with a powerful strike. He reclaims Mei and announces that he will take her to his territory. Ikuto steps forward, refusing to let Taiga take Mei. Taiga challenges him to a duel for her. Ikuto accepts because he believes a man should always protect a woman. The fight begins, and Taiga proves to be very skilled. He lands several strong blows on Ikuto. Suzu, watching the fight, wants to help, but Ikuto stops her. In the distance, someone is watching everything unfold. They talk to their companion, Taka, and decide to help, but wait to see more. Mei watches as Ikuto struggles, his injuries worsening. She agrees to go with Taiga to the north, hoping to stop the fight, but Ikuto refuses to let her. He stands up, determined to continue. Taiga declares that he will end it with a single, decisive strike. Ikuto tries to dodge, but his legs give out. The force of Taiga's attack rips Mei's clothes, causing the protagonist's nose to bleed at the sight. Taiga, momentarily blinded, is caught off guard. The unknown person who had been watching finally steps in. They quickly approach and tell Ikuto to strike between Taiga's two tails. Ikuto follows the advice and defeats Taiga with a single blow. With Taiga defeated, Mei can now stay in the village. Taiga, badly injured, leaves. The protagonist wonders about the mysterious person who helped him. Later, Taiga is seen talking to a shadowy figure. It turns out to be the leader of the West. The leader claims he only helped because Taiga wanted to lose. Taiga denies it and leaves. Back in the village, the protagonist bids farewell to Mei. She thanks him for everything and holds his hands, telling him that he looked great during the fight. Suzu watches from a distance, realizing that they are growing closer. Late at night, Chikaji is still snoring away like a lazy sack of potatoes. Panako, who has clearly had enough, bursts in and yells at her to clean her disaster of a room. Every morning, she promises to do it, and every night she conveniently forgets. While this mess is going on, Shiag is busy casting a spell all over the island, and the next morning, things get completely out of control. Suzu wakes up and realizes something is very wrong. She looks in the mirror and screams. She's got cat ears and a tail. Meanwhile, the walking embarrassment known as Ikuto sees himself and freaks out too. He's got animal features now, and Tonkatsu, who was already a pig in personality, has actually turned into a real pig. As they step outside, things only get weirder. All the animals in the village are now humans, which sounds cool until they realize that the chaos level has shot through the roof. Just as they start heading to other houses, they see Yukino, who is now a giant bear. But instead of roaring and causing destruction like a proper bear, she's being carried around by some random girl who introduces herself as Kamu. At the windmill next door, Mei has turned into a monkey, and Tono, who everyone thought was a guy, is now a woman. Suzu and Ikuto just stand there, blinking, trying to process the mess in front of them. Their adventure of confusion continues as they come across a puppy and a squirrel. But no, it's not just any puppy and squirrel. It's actually Ren and Makoto, his little sister. At this point, logic has completely left the building, and then, out of nowhere, a stunning girl walks up, wishes them luck, and disappears. Nobody knows who she is, but there's no time to think about it. When they finally reach the village, absolute madness greets them. Everyone has changed, but Chikage? Nope. She's the same as always. She casually tells them that she's the reason for the transformation, having cast the spell on the entire village. Suzu and Ikuto start demanding answers, but Chikaji is too busy pulling nonsense tricks with her magic hat. First, she pulls out a giant bird that immediately flies away. Then, she tries again, and this time, rabbit ears pop out. But instead of pulling out a normal rabbit, she yanks out Ayane, who is only half transformed. She's got bunny ears, feet, and a tail, looking like some kind of weird experiment gone wrong. Ayane explains that she avoided full transformation by dodging the spell, but to do it, she sacrificed her sister, Machi. Speaking of Machi, she suddenly comes falling out of the sky like a rejected superhero, except instead of landing gracefully, she crashes right into them. She's furious. Ayane and Suzu decide they've had enough of Chikaga's nonsense and team up to force her to undo the spell. But Chikage, she doesn't care at all. She just laughs and flies away like a maniac. Determined to fix things, Suzu and Ayane go digging through Chikage's books. Instead of finding something useful, they accidentally open a book containing a genie. This genie claims he'll grant them 7 wishes. But then Ikuto, being the absolute cow that he is, doubts it. Suzu asks for pastries, and poof, she gets them. Ayane, in her desperation, starts screaming wishes left and right, wasting them all. To make things worse, a random chicken standing next to them wishes for a box of bread. Now, only 4 wishes remain. Suzu finally takes control and suggests they use the remaining wishes wisely. They wish for Chikage to be captured, and the genie actually does it. For a moment, things seem hopeful, but Chikage, being the sneaky troublemaker she is, tricks the genie into setting her free. While she's escaping, Ayane slaps the genie in frustration. Now, with only 1 wish left, everyone starts arguing over who should use it. Then, out of nowhere, Machi appears and uses the final wish for a cup of tea. Everyone just stands there, blinking, completely doomed. With no other option, Chikage locks them all in cubes to perform some ridiculous magic trick where she plans to saw through the cubes. Just as she's about to go full circus act, Ikuto, the goat-brained idiot, faints from sheer uselessness. Right at that moment, the beautiful girl they met earlier reappears. Turns out she's Panako, and she's here to put an end to Chikage's nonsense. She reminds Chikage about her promise to clean her room and decides that enough is enough. She picks up a rock and knocks Chikage out cold. With Chikage unconscious, the spell finally breaks. Everyone on the island returns to normal. Back at Suzu's house, the walking disaster known as Ikuto wakes up, completely clueless, thinking it was all just a dream. The others don't bother correcting him. He's too much of a lost cause anyway. At Suzu's house, that useless lump Ikuto and she are having dinner, when suddenly an arrow crashes through the window, nearly impaling Ikuto like the oversized scarecrow he is. Attached to it is a message. Ren's mother, for some inexplicable reason, thinks Ikuto would make a great son-in-law. The woman clearly needs glasses. She wants Ikuto to go on a blind date with Ren, and Makoto will be there too. While they read the note, a mysterious blue-haired girl lurks in the forest, watching Suzu's house like a villain in a low-budget spy movie. On the way to the village, Suzu and Ikuto talk about Ren's family and their ninja lineage. Ikuto, being the brainless loaf he is, struggles to comprehend even basic details. Then, they stumble upon a girl lying in the road, accompanied by a tiny cow-like creature. Because nothing says normal day like finding a passed-out girl and a mini cow on the road. Turns out it's Shinobu, Ren, and Makoto's sister. Takes Shinobu and her weird pet cow to her house and gives them food. The starving duo attacks the meal like they haven't eaten in months, which, as they claim, is exactly the case. Shinobu, with food still in her mouth, suddenly demands to know who Ikuto is and why she's never seen him before. This is when Kudo, instead of lying and sparing the world, confirms his existence. Instantly excited, Shinobu challenges Ikuto to a sword duel outside. Because what better way to greet someone than trying to slice them open? Ikuto, the cowardly sack of flour he is, refuses. But Shinobu insists, claiming that everyone talks about his legendary sword skills. Clearly, rumors on this island spread like wildfire because Ikuto has the combat ability of a sleep-deprived turtle. She then dramatically recounts how her master, the Cat Master, sent her on a mission to find Ikuto, the so-called warrior who defeated the Northern Master. The exaggeration is so ridiculous that even Suzu can't believe it. But before anyone can expose the lie, Shinobu insists on a fight. Of course, in true comedic fashion, she immediately trips and falls, proving that she might be a ninja, but she's also an absolute klutz. That night, Shinobu continues harassing Ikuto, pestering him non-stop to fight her. Even when he's trying to sleep, the poor excuse for a ninja won't shut up. Suzu, at her wit's end, informs Ikuto that Shinobu will not leave unless he fights her. The next morning, Ikuto wakes up to find Shinobu sleeping next to him, which immediately earns him the fury of Suzu. Later, the trio goes fishing, but Ikuto, being the insufferable block of wood he is, only talks to Shinobu, ignoring Suzu entirely. Suzu, understandably fed up, catches a massive fish, and then out of sheer spite, releases it back into the ocean just to make a point. That night, in the bath, Ikuto, still whining about fighting Shinobu, claims he will lose if he does. Shinobu, of course, takes this as an invitation to break into the bath because boundaries do not exist for her. She sneaks in, but Ikuto, the panicked little goat, tries to escape. Unfortunately for him, Shinobu slips on soap and lands directly on him. Just as this disaster unfolds, Suzu walks in and witnesses everything. Fueled by pure jealousy, she forces Ikuto to fight Shinobu just to get rid of her. The next morning, Suzu feels a little guilty about pushing the fight, but then remembers how Shinobu constantly threw herself at Ikuto and decides she doesn't feel guilty anymore. Meanwhile, Ikuto is outside, pretending to train. insane. Suzu, still irritated, brings him a packed lunch while watching him fumble around like a lost chicken. At the fighting arena, Shinobu shows up wearing a ridiculous, provocative outfit, following Chi's terrible advice. Apparently, the plan is to distract Ikuto, but let's be real, there's nothing in Ikuto's head to distract. As the fight begins, all the girls on the island show up to watch. Shinobu moves at lightning speed, but Ikuto, shockingly, doesn't immediately fall on his face. The audience, including a chicken named Amber, comments on Ikuto's strange fighting style. Then, Shinobu decides to use her ultimate ninja technique, creating mirages of herself. Suddenly, there are 7 Shinobus surrounding Ikuto. For a brief moment, it looks like he's actually thinking, which is a rare sight. He carefully strikes one illusion after another until he finds the real one. But before she can make her final move, she, of course, trips again. In an attempt to catch her, Ikuto accidentally grabs her chest. Instantly mortified, he stammers out an apology. Shinobu, instead of retaliating, simply declares herself the loser, claiming that the mere touch weakened her. Ikuto, for once, has done something without humiliating himself. Later, Shinobu says goodbye to Suzu and Ikuto, but as she turns to leave, she trips one last time, cementing her status as the clumsiest ninja in existence. A young girl is running for her life inside a dark labyrinth, chased by a monstrous creature. Just when things look bad, a voice from the shadows tells the monster to stop. Meanwhile, back in the library, that walking embarrassment known as Ikuto is reading a book about the same girl. Before his single brain cell can process anything, Chikage interrupts him. The useless lump of meat thinks he recognizes the girl's name, and Chikage confirms that someone on the island has the same name. Then, out of nowhere, Suzu's mother appears to greet them, and right on cue, thunder rumbles dramatically in the background. At Suzu's house, she is alone, and the storm rages outside. A shadow appears at the door, making her scream. Turns out, it's just a broom with a sheet over it. But under the sheet is a creepy, unsettling invitation. The next day, Mei, Suzu, and the human-sized mistake, Ikuto, all realize they got the same weird invitation. They head to the Tsukimi Pavilion, confused about who sent them. The place is supposed to have a lady in charge, but no one knows who actually sent the invites. When they arrive, they meet a girl named Sakuya. She's happy to see Ikuto, for some reason, but mid-greeting, her head falls off. Everyone screams. It turns out she's a robot, and sometimes her screws come loose. Just like Ikuto, except his problem is permanent. She tries to carry their bags, but her arms fall off too, scaring them even more. Inside the pavilion, the other girls realize Ikuto has arrived and start scrubbing their bodies like they are preparing for battle. Their brilliant plan was to trick that barnyard animal into bathing with them. Chikage, always up to something, volunteers to lure him in. In another room, Sakuya chats with the human turnip, Ikuto. He asks why he didn't get an invitation. She explains that she didn't send them either. She just got a letter from Suzu, saying all the girls should bathe together that afternoon. That rotten vegetable is confused. Before his 2 working neurons can connect, Chikage interrupts, pointing out that none of the girls actually sent the invitations. The seal on them matches the one from a book, and the genius mistake that is Ikuto finally realizes they may be in trouble. Chikage explains that the book isn't just a story, but a record of past events, and she thinks something bad is about to happen again. Ikuto, being as useful as a broken umbrella in a hurricane, tells her not to talk about it so casually. Of course, Chikage is actually excited to see how things play out. That night at dinner, all the girls looked exhausted. They blame Ikuto for making them wait in the bath, as if being around him wasn't bad enough. The brainless cow accidentally blurts out the name Bashmia, warning everyone to be careful. Right on cue, a scream comes from outside. Sakuya immediately pulls out weapons hidden in her braids, because of course a robot girl is better prepared than Ikuto will ever be. The door creaks open, and in falls Shinobu, dragging her cow behind her. Both collapse in a heap like a pair of exhausted potatoes. Shinobu explains that she also got an invitation but got lost on the way. Everyone moves inside to eat, but Ikuto, still stuck on his ridiculous theories, keeps suspecting Chikage of being behind it all. Then he realizes the bath is finally empty. This brain-dead goat leaps at the chance to take a peaceful soak. But before he can enjoy the warm water, Ayane sneaks in behind him. He barely notices until he turns around and sees her wearing a demon mask. Like the cowardly donkey he is, he shrieks in terror. His scream echoes through the pavilion, alerting everyone. He stumbles back and finds Ayane lying unconscious in the bath. Panic spreads, but before he can process what's happening, he realizes something is stuck on her body. Naturally, since he is the king of terrible decision-making, he assumes it belongs to him. From above, a masked figure laughs. This mysterious man introduces himself as Bashmia and reveals that he poured a spicy potion all over Ayane's body. The clueless, brainless, hay-eating farm animal and a girl are in a library, The goat-brained boy proudly declares that one day he will write an amazing, mysterious story. The girl, probably just being polite, says she will wait for it. That's how lies are born. Back in the present, a masked troublemaker, Bashmia, reveals himself. He's behind everything, all just to see the girls scream. He dangles the antidote in front of them and tells them to catch him if they want it. Then he dashes off like a mischievous goblin. Sakuya transforms into a weapon and starts bombing him, but Ikuto, being the senseless cow that he is, stops her, worried she might end up killing him. If he had even half a brain, he'd let her do it. Meanwhile, the girls are getting ready for Ikuto's arrival. Some are playing games, others are making themselves look pretty, and Shinobu is tied to a massage chair for some reason. Ikuto, the dim-witted goat, enters the room and finds her unconscious. He moves on to Ayan's room, where she tries to show him her back in her dream. When she wakes up, she screams. The chaos continues in Mei's room, where she suddenly jumps on Ikuto, thanking him for picking her, then starts undressing. The cow freezes, completely useless. Basha appears, announcing that he used a potion to awaken Mei's desires. Ikuto finally remembers he has legs and chases him, leading to Yukino's room. Basha spills a potion on her bed, making her think she's the ruler of the world. The goat runs to another room and finds a girl poking a straw doll. Smartly, he decides she's not a threat. Then, a scream echoes from Ren's room. Her younger sister's hugging her too tightly. Ikuto, still moving like a headless chicken, barges into more rooms, getting beaten up every time. Suddenly, a fake Ikuto enters Suzu's room, acting all sweet. But the real farm animal arrives just in time to expose the fake. Basha panics and escapes to the rooftop. Ikuto chases after him but remembers he's afraid of heights. Basha laughs and throws the antidotes into the air. With the brain power of a potato, Ikuto finally does something right. He jumps and grabs them. Bashmia pretends to leave, but Chikage catches him. It turns out he's none other than Ikuto's own mother, the author of the book. The next day, the girls still don't know if any of them were picked by Ikuto. Meanwhile, the goat remains as clueless as ever. The next morning, Ayane is searching for Machi, the lazy sack of potatoes, because it's their turn for cleaning duty. But of course, the useless lump is nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, behind some bushes, Machi, whose luck is as bad as Ikuto's brain, accidentally knocks over a statue. Instead of just being a harmless old rock, the statue releases a cursed paper that basically screams danger. Because bad luck never comes alone, a shape-shifting creature emerges from it. Machi, in a desperate attempt to stop the beast, gets a nice little reward for her efforts, getting smacked on the head. The creature escapes, leaving Machi to rub her poor skull and wonder why she even tries. Over at the river, Suzu and Ikuto, the walking disaster, are failing at fishing. Suzu is convinced it's impossible to catch anything, which makes the cow-brained Ikuto mad. He suddenly decides to act like a hard-working man and puts in all his effort. Miraculously, he actually manages to catch a bunch of fish. But before anyone can celebrate, their fish, and even Suzu's fishing rod, suddenly turn into stones. Turns out, they were deceived by a demon named Uki, who had been disguised as their pig the entire time. Machi appears behind them, explaining the situation, but before they can catch the demon, she trips over her own feet and falls into the river. Determined to track down the trickster Tanuki, Ikuto makes the dumbest remark yet, saying it will be difficult to find the demon. Machi, not having time for his nonsense, quickly corrects him, saying that anything fake will always reveal itself through its flaws. She is confident she will uncover the demon's true identity using her spells. They head to the village, where everything seems normal, that is, until they see Yukino. When they ask her if she's seen anything unusual, she suddenly transforms into the demon and flees. Another scream rings out, and they find two people claiming to be the same person. Ikuto, using his single functioning brain cell, sets a trap. He declares that the real one has two moles, and when one of them agrees and lifts her sleeve, Ikuto grabs her arm and exposes the lie. Because the real person would never reveal her shoulder, the demon realizes it has been fooled, throws a giant rock, and escapes. Later, they see Ren wearing new clothes, which immediately makes them suspicious. Like the absolutely chaotic bunch they are, they decide to start undressing her to check for signs of the demon. Unfortunately, they were mistaken, and Ren blames herself for wearing something unfamiliar. Before anyone can recover from that mess, the demon appears again and, as usual, throws a massive rock to block their path. It's like the creature's whole battle strategy revolves around chucking boulders and running away. As they continue searching, they find Chikage at a well, claiming the demon jumped into it. Gullible as ever, Machi falls right into the trap and tumbles down. The demon escapes yet again. Not long after, Ayane screams that she finally found Machi. But of course, Machi assumes she's the demon and starts attacking her own sister. It takes a solid moment before she realizes her mistake. Ayane tells Machi to come back and do her cleaning duty, but Machi refuses because she still has a demon to catch. Ayane, being the loyal sibling she is, decides to tag along. They encounter two shinobis who immediately start fighting. Despite their intense battle, they realize they are equally skilled and develop a weird mutual respect. Machi wants to use her spells to identify the real one, but before she can, the shinobis realizes multiply and launch an attack. In the middle of this madness, Ikuto, the clumsy cow, trips and accidentally causes the real shinobu's dress to fall. A complete mess, as always. As the day drags on, everyone is exhausted. Suzu finally gives up and says it's impossible to locate the demon. The goat-brained Ikuto immediately agrees, proving once again that his only talent is agreeing with other people's statements. But suddenly, Suzu realizes something. The Ikuto next to her is actually a fake. They immediately capture the demon, who finally runs out of tricks. Machi seals it back into a statue, explaining that it will take 100 years for it to revive. With the crisis over, they turn to Ikuto, who was knocked out earlier. When he wakes up, he actually believes everything was just a dream. Machi and Ayane, unable to resist, decide to mess with him by giving him their most mischievous expressions, scaring the poor farm animal senseless. Meanwhile, Yukino is walking through the forest when she finds a shiny blue feather. Thinking it might belong to the legendary bluebird, she picks it up. The next morning, Ikuto, still as hopeless as ever, is training with Mr. Chicken. Suzu comments on his improvement, which honestly is a miracle, considering he usually functions with the intelligence of a spoon. Ikuto mentions that he wants to return to his old home and defeat someone from there. Suzu, realizing she might lose her personal punching bag, runs off. But Ikuto, being as dense as ever, keeps talking about going back. At the river, Suzu struggles with the thought of Ikuto leaving. Suddenly, she sees Yukino and learns about the blue feather. Yukino believes it might belong to the mythical bluebird. Suzu at first refuses to go on a search because she has firewood to gather, but Kuma Kuma, being the helpful bear that he is, drags her along anyway. At Suzu's house, Mr. Chicken talks about how finding the bluebird brings great luck. But Ikuto, the doubting goat, doesn't believe in it and instead goes to fetch water. As they search the forest, Suzu begins to suspect that the bluebird is just a story. However, the feather in Yukino's hand makes her believe otherwise. Then they see something moving in the bushes. Approaching cautiously, they find an unfamiliar bird. But before they can get closer, it runs off. They chase after it. But the moment it takes flight, they trip and roll down a cliff. Back at Suzu's house, Ikuto returns only to realize Suzu is missing. The potato-brained fool is actually surprised. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the cliff, Suzu wakes up and realizes they are stuck. To make things worse, she has a wound on her leg. They attempt to climb, but fail, growing more and more worried that no one will find them. Back in the village, Kagami starts to worry because Yukino hasn't returned either. Feeling guilty, Ikuto finally decides to search the forest. In the forest, Konatsu sniffs the ground, trying to find their scent. Meanwhile, Suzu and Yukino are starving. Suzu remembers she has some cherries she had been saving, but decides to share them with Yukino. Then, as if things weren't bad enough, it starts raining, washing away their scent trail. Desperate, Ikuto runs through the forest screaming Suzu's name. Out of nowhere, the bluebird appears. Instead of ignoring him like any sensible creature would, it actually calls his name and carries him to a specific part of the forest before flying away. Somehow, by accident, Ikuto stumbles right into Suzu's location. Upon hearing her voice, he finds the cliff and helps rescue them. Later, everyone works together to get Suzu and Yukino back to safety. Ren even builds a fence to prevent anyone else from falling. As they finally head home, Ikuto, in his rare moment of reflection, decides he must protect Suzu above all. The villagers are busy harvesting crops while Suzu is handing out vegetables. The walking sack of hay, Ikuto, interrupts her to remind her to distribute them equally. But Suzu, as hopeless at math as Ikuto is at thinking, struggles with counting. Meanwhile, the goat-brained fool decides to leave the house, and Suzu wonders where he's going. It turns out he's going to school, because apparently, even cows need education. At school, Chikage teaches history, Shinobu teaches apparently, and Machi teaches health. Somehow, Ikuto, the empty-headed turnip, has become a math teacher. The girls in his class aren't there to learn, but to win his affection. Back home, Suzu makes it clear she hates math, and refuses to go to school. Ikuto, probably too tired to argue, decides not to force her. Later, Chikage gathers the others and talks about Suzu's aversion to school. They all agree to trick her into attending, believing it's for her own good. The cow-headed Ikuto, at first, feels they shouldn't do it, but then realizes that everyone actually cares about Suzu. Since he follows other people's ideas like a lost sheep, he agrees to help. The next day, Ikuto and Suzu head to the village when they meet several girls claiming they have a day off. They keep running into different girls from the island, and Suzu, smarter than the walking disaster beside her, grows suspicious. She suggests they go to Ren's house, but as they continue, they notice all the houses are closed. Forced to take a longer route, Suzu becomes increasingly frustrated. Then, out of nowhere, they slide down a hidden trap and land in a classroom. The goat finally realizes it was all a setup, but Suzu is already making a run for it. She dodges Ren, Yukino, and Shinobu like a pro, but the village is against her. Kugo bribes Tatsu with pastries to help catch her. Suzu, in her desperation, lands on top of Ikuto, who pretends to be unconscious like the lazy ox he is. Thinking she has a chance to escape, she tries to run, but Ikuto grabs her leg and tickles her until she surrenders. The overgrown farm animal finally uses his strength for something other than carrying his uselessness around. Hio tells Suzu she should study, but she insists she hates it. The cow-brained fool finally says something reasonable, explaining that everyone went through this effort because they care about her. Realizing she's doomed, Suzu gives in. They return to school, and everyone is delighted. Then, the cherry on top, Ikuto, the last creature anyone should trust with numbers, reveals he's the math teacher. Suzu somehow is okay with it. Chikage says she'll start from scratch with her, and then, to make things even worse, Ikuto will be her teacher. The cow wins again. The day starts with Ikuto doing manual labor, like the hard-working mule he is, while Suzu wanders the beach looking for seaweed. Instead of seaweed, she finds a bottle, the same one that Masaki sent to his sister on her birthday. Suzu scurries off to show it to Udo, and they both think it's from Masaki. The letter says she went to look for him at sea but got lost, which, let's be honest, runs in the family. Like the headless chicken he is, Ikuto dashes off to the water trying to swim to his sister. Predictably, the ocean smacks him back with whirlpools, reminding him that he's no fish. But instead of accepting reality, this brain-dead goat decides to take to the sky. He builds some ridiculous contraption to fly, and with Suzu's help, he actually gets airborne. Mid-air, he remembers his fear of heights, because of course he does. But thinking of Masaki somehow keeps him from passing out. Meanwhile, the girls spot this absolute buffoon flapping around in the sky and rush to the beach. Ikuto barely makes it through one whirlpool before a tornado hurls him back like a ragdoll. The girls, being more useful than he'll ever be, decide to help. They create a giant slingshot to launch him, but as expected, he still gets yeeted right back into the sky. Then, the genius realization hits them. He also needs a boat. Takataka chimes in, basically saying, even if this cow could fly, the ocean would still wreck him. Machi steps in with a dumb offer. She'll do a ritual to extract Masaki's soul, but only if Ikuto marries her. Somehow, she's making progress, but En ruins it by knocking Ikuto out cold. Chikage then brings out a genie, because why not? But Ikuto screws up his wish. Shocking. The Kudo flares up, and suddenly, all the girls are fighting for Ikuto's attention. Suzu, fed up with the nonsense, tells them to stop harassing him and runs off, realizing she doesn't want him to leave. Ikuto chases after her, passing the wise old woman who casually drops the bomb that there is a way to leave the island. But if he leaves, Suzu has to go too. Back home, Suzu finally spills the secret. They need to seek the sea dragon god's help. To do that, they must retrieve a key from Mount Fuji. Ikuto hesitates. Of course he does, but realizes it's their only way out, only to walk right into a trap set by Ren, Chikage, and Yukino, because even in escape, Ikuto stays lost. The three girls start running toward the clueless goat, but Chick activates a trap, dropping a massive rock that flattens everything, including Gren and Yukino. As the door opens from the outside, Ayane storms in, demanding a duel with Ikuto to stop him from leaving. But Ikuto keeps moving with Suzu. Suddenly, the giant rock comes rolling after them. Just when things look bad, Taiga, the island's leader, arrives and punches the rock so hard it flies back toward Chikage, who smugly thinks this will keep Kudo stuck forever. Instead of being grateful, Taiga picks a fight and reveals that to get the key, they must defeat the 4 leaders protecting the Sea Dragon God before he can attack. Mei shows up, makes him trip. and climbs a tree to pelt him with coconuts while Tono electrocutes him. Things seem to go well until Pandaro appears, announcing that he was bribed with honey to take them down. Of course, Machi was behind this nonsense. Ikuto, the clumsy goat, fights him, but just when Pandaro is about to win, Shinobu stumbles in, lost as always. Thinking Ikuto is training, she jumps in to help. Machi, watching from the shadows, tries to knock Shinobu out with a dart, but Shinobu deflects it like a pro. Ikuto and Suzu leave Shinobu in charge and continue their journey. They run into Suzu's master, the leader of the South, who challenges Ikuto. Just as Ikuto braces for battle, she grabs his tails only to realize he's just a normal cat in disguise. Suddenly, a whole bunch of fake master cats appear, surrounding them. Ikuto and Suzu scramble to capture them one by one until Ikuto, he grabs the right cat, winning the battle. Reaching Mount Fuji, they prepare for their next opponent, Keiga, the chicken. This bird-brained menace steals the key, revealing himself as the leader of the West. Just as Keiga's about to finish him, Suzu takes the hit instead, begging Ikuto to stop. Of course, this only fuels his stubbornness. He tricks Keiga and lands a lucky hit, stealing the key and winning. Now they head to Dragon Island, ready to face the temple of the Sea Dragon God.